The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor of Sterling Financial Tower, revealing the pristine marble lobby of one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms. What happened in the next 5 minutes would cost someone $10 million and change 2 lives forever. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jasmine Mitchell straightened her navy blazer as she stepped out of the elevator, her portfolio clutched firmly in her hand. 3 years at Davidson & Associates had taught her that confidence was everything in this business, especially when you looked like her in a sea of faces that didn't. At 28, she'd already closed deals worth millions, but today felt different. Today, she was walking into the biggest presentation of her career. The morning had started like any other. Jasmine arrived at the office at 7:30, a full hour before most of her colleagues, reviewing her notes for the Henderson Industries pitch one final time. The deal was massive, a complete restructuring of their pension fund worth over $10 million in fees for the firm. She'd spent 3 months building the relationship with their CFO, crafting a proposal that was nothing short of brilliant. "Morning, Jasmine," called out Rebecca Chen from the reception desk, the only other person who regularly arrived before 8. "Ready for the big day?" Jasmine smiled, feeling the familiar flutter of pre-presentation nerves mixed with excitement. "As ready as I'll ever be. Is Mr. Davidson in yet?" "Just got here. Conference room A is all set up for you." The presentation wasn't scheduled until 10, but Jasmine wanted everything perfect. She made her way through the maze of cubicles and glass-walled offices, each one a testament to the firm's success. Awards lined the walls, photographs of handshakes with Fortune 500 CEOs, newspaper clippings announcing major deals. Someday, she thought, her name would be on those articles too. Conference Room A was their crown jewel, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a mahogany table that could seat 20, and technology that would make NASA jealous. Jasmine began setting up her presentation, connecting her laptop and testing the projector. Everything had to be flawless. Well, well, look who's making themselves at home. The voice made her stomach drop. Richard Davidson III stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. At 55, he commanded respect through a combination of old money breeding and ruthless business acumen. He was also, as Jasmine had learned through countless subtle interactions, someone who believed certain people belonged in certain places, and she wasn't in hers. "Good morning, Mr. Davidson. I wanted to get everything ready for the Henderson presentation." He walked slowly around the table, inspecting her setup like a general reviewing troops. "Henderson Industries. Yes, that's today, isn't it?" His tone suggested he'd forgotten, though Jasmine knew he never forgot anything that mattered to the bottom line. 10 o'clock. I've prepared comprehensive projections showing how our restructuring plan will save them 15% annually while increasing returns by... Save it for the clients, Mitchell. He picked up one of her carefully prepared folders, flipping through it with disinterest. "Though I have to wonder if they'll be comfortable with the face of their representation." The words hung in the air like smoke. Jasmine felt her chest tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. 3 years of these subtle daggers had taught her to armor herself, though they still found their mark. "I believe they'll be comfortable with the results, sir. The preliminary numbers speak for themselves." Davidson set down the folder and fixed her with a stare that had intimidated countless executives. "Do they? Because I've been thinking about this deal all weekend, and I'm not sure you're the right fit for Henderson Industries. They're a traditional company, family-owned for 3 generations, very particular about who they work with." Jasmine's hands clenched at her sides. "Sir, I've been the primary contact on this account for 3 months. I built this relationship from nothing, and I'm sure they appreciated your enthusiasm." The pause before enthusiasm felt loaded with meaning. But closing a deal of this magnitude requires a certain level of sophistication, a certain cultural fit. The conference room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Jasmine had faced this before. The suggestion that her success was somehow lesser, that her presence made clients uncomfortable, that she needed to know her place, but never this directly, never with stakes this high. "Mr. Davidson, I respectfully disagree. The Henderson team has been very responsive to my proposals, and..." "Have they? Or are they simply being polite?" He moved closer, his voice dropping to a patronizing whisper. "Let me explain something to you, Mitchell. This isn't about your little charts and graphs. This is about relationships, about trust, about people wanting to work with someone who understands their world. The implication was clear as glass. Jasmine felt her professional composure beginning to crack, 3 years of swallowed insults threatening to spill over. But she held firm, her voice steady despite the fire building in her chest. "I understand the business world perfectly well, sir. My track record speaks to that." Davidson laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Your track record? You mean the small accounts we've thrown your way? The charity cases and community organizations?" He gestured around the pristine conference room. "This is the major leagues, Mitchell. This is where real business gets done, by people who belong here." The mask was off now. 3 years of coded language and subtle undermining had given way to something uglier, more honest. Jasmine realized that every small victory, every client relationship she'd built, every late night she'd spent perfecting proposals, none of it mattered to him. In his eyes, she would always be an outsider playing dress-up in a world that wasn't meant for her. "I've earned my place here," she said quietly, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. "Have you?" Davidson moved to the window, gazing out at the city skyline as if he owned it all. "Or are you here because of quotas? Because it looks good in the company brochure to have a diverse face or two?" The words hit like physical blows. Jasmine felt her carefully constructed professional persona beginning to fracture, but beneath the hurt was something else. A crystalline anger that sharpened her focus instead of clouding it. "My results speak for themselves, Mr. Davidson. Henderson Industries requested me specifically for this presentation. They've seen my work, and they trust my judgment." He turned from the window, his expression shifting to something almost pitying. "Oh, Mitchell, you really don't understand, do you? They requested you because I told them you were our diversity hire. They wanted to seem progressive, inclusive, but when it comes time to sign on the dotted line, when it comes time to trust someone with their family's legacy..." He shook his head slowly. "They want someone who looks like success. Someone who fits." The conference room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of traffic 42 floors below. Jasmine stood perfectly still, processing the magnitude of what had just been said. Every client meeting, every handshake, every smile. Had it all been performance? Had she been introduced as the company's token, rather than as their top performer? But even as the doubt crept in, something else crystallized in her mind. The Henderson team hadn't treated her like a diversity hire. Their questions had been sharp, technical, challenging. They'd pushed back on her recommendations not out of politeness, but because they were genuinely engaged with her ideas. The CFO, Margaret Henderson Walsh, had specifically complimented her innovative approach to risk management. Davidson was still talking, but his words seemed to come from a great distance. "So I've made a decision. Tom Bradley will be taking over the Henderson account. He'll present your work, give you full credit, of course, but he'll be the face of the relationship moving forward. It's better for everyone involved." The room snapped back into focus. 3 months of work, her breakthrough opportunity, her chance to prove herself at the highest level. All of it being handed to Tom Bradley, a mediocre performer whose primary qualification was his pedigree and his ability to tell the right jokes at client dinners. "You can't do that," Jasmine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can and I will. It's my company, Mitchell. These are my decisions to make." He checked his expensive watch. "Speaking of which, I need to brief Tom before the presentation. Why don't you take the day off? Clear your head. We'll talk about your future here when things settle down." He was dismissing her. After 3 years of excellence, after building this deal from nothing, after proving herself again and again, he was dismissing her like a child who'd been caught playing in the grown-ups' room. But as Davidson moved toward the door, something unexpected happened. His phone buzzed with an urgent text message, and his confident stride faltered. He glanced at the screen, and Jasmine watched his face pale beneath his perfectly applied corporate tan. "Impossible," he muttered, then louder. "This can't be right." Jasmine remained frozen by the conference table, watching as the man who'd just systematically destroyed her career began to unravel in real time. Whatever was in that message, it was changing everything. And in the distance, she could hear the elevator chiming, announcing the early arrival of the Henderson Industries team, 30 minutes ahead of schedule, catching everyone off guard. The elevator doors opened with their familiar chime, and 3 figures stepped onto the 42nd floor 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Margaret Henderson Walsh, CEO of Henderson Industries, moved with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in every room. At 62, she'd transformed her family's manufacturing company from a regional player into a billion-dollar empire, and she hadn't done it by accepting anyone's limitations on her potential. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Behind her walked James Chen, their CFO, and Dr. Sarah Martinez, head of their Pension Oversight Committee. They'd flown in from Chicago specifically for this meeting, rearranging their schedules because they were genuinely excited about the proposal they'd received. "We're quite early," James mentioned as they approached the reception desk. "Good," Margaret replied crisply. "I want to review those risk assessment models one more time before we make our decision." Ms. Mitchell's approach to portfolio diversification was fascinating. I've never seen anyone structure hedge positions quite like that. Rebecca looked up from her computer, surprised to see clients arriving so early. "Ms. Henderson-Walsh, we weren't expecting you until 10. Change of plans. We were able to catch an earlier flight. Is Jasmine available? I had some additional questions about her inflation protection strategies." The request was direct, specific, and left no doubt about who they were there to see. Rebecca glanced nervously toward the conference room, where heated voices could still be heard through the supposedly soundproof glass. Let me check on that for you, please. Have a seat. Can I get you coffee?" Back in conference room A, Davidson was frantically scrolling through his phone, his earlier confidence evaporating with each swipe. The text message that had shaken him was just the beginning. A cascade of notifications was now flooding his screen, each one worse than the last. "Sir?" Jasmine ventured, watching her boss transform from predator to prey in real time. Davidson looked up, his face ashen. "The Morrison account. They're pulling out. Effective immediately." His fingers trembled slightly as he continued reading. "They're citing philosophical differences with our company culture." Jasmine frowned. The Morrison account was worth $3 million annually. Not their biggest client, but substantial enough that losing them would send shockwaves through the firm. What kind of philosophical differences? Before Davidson could answer, another notification chimed, then another. His phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree, each message delivering what appeared to be increasingly devastating news. "Berkshire Holdings is requesting a meeting to discuss their concerns about our diversity and inclusion practices," he read aloud, his voice hollow. "Patterson Industries wants to review their contract terms in light of recent allegations." Quote, the word allegations hung in the air like a sword. Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. What allegations? Davidson's phone rang before he could answer. The caller ID showed the name that could make or break careers in their industry. Jonathan Walsh, editor of Financial Services Weekly, the trade publication that every major investor read religiously. "I have to take this," Davidson muttered, accepting the call. "Walsh, what's going on?" Even from across the room, Jasmine could hear the aggressive tone on the other end of the line. Davidson's responses were clipped, defensive. "That's completely taken out of context. No, we don't comment on personnel matters. This is highly irregular." As the conversation continued, Davidson's complexion shifted from pale to gray. Whatever Walsh was telling him was systematically destroying everything he'd built. When he finally hung up, his hands were visibly shaking. "What did he want?" Jasmine asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Davidson slumped into one of the conference room chairs, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. "Someone leaked audio of our conversation. The whole thing. It's going to be the lead story in tomorrow's edition." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Their entire exchange, his dismissal of her abilities, his casual racism, his admission that he'd introduced her to clients as a diversity hire, all of it would be public knowledge within hours. How is that possible? Davidson gestured weakly at the conference room's state-of-the-art technology, the recording system for client presentations. Its voice activated. Someone must have triggered it when you were setting up. He looked at her with something approaching panic. This will destroy us both. But even as the implications sank in, Jasmine felt something unexpected, relief. For 3 years, she'd endured whispered comments, subtle undermining, and systemic exclusion, while maintaining her professionalism and swallowing her rage. Now, finally, there would be consequences. "Maybe it should," she said quietly. Davidson's head snapped up. "What?" Maybe it should destroy us. Maybe this is exactly what needs to happen. Before he could respond, Rebecca's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Davidson? The Henderson Industries team is here. They're asking specifically for Ms. Mitchell. The irony was exquisite. The clients Davidson had assumed would be uncomfortable with Jasmine's presence were asking for her by name, just as news of his bigotry was spreading through their industry like wildfire. Davidson stood slowly, straightening his tie in a futile attempt to regain his composure. We need to control this situation. I'll handle the Henderson meeting while you... No. The word came out stronger than Jasmine had intended, surprising them both. They asked for me. This is my presentation, my relationship, my deal. Mitchell, you don't understand the position we're in. If Henderson Industries discovers that we're about to be at the center of a discrimination scandal, they'll discover it anyway. The question is whether they hear about it from someone who was complicit in covering it up, or from someone who was fighting against it. Davidson stared at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. The confident, dismissive executive was gone, replaced by a desperate man watching his empire crumble in real time. Another notification chimed on his phone. This time, it was an email from the firm's board of directors, requesting an emergency meeting. The subject line was ominous. Urgent, reputational crisis management. The board knows, he whispered, reading the message. They want answers. They want solutions. They want... He trailed off, but the implication was clear. They wanted someone to blame, someone to sacrifice, someone whose departure might appease their increasingly horrified clients. Margaret Henderson Walsh's voice carried through the conference room door as she spoke with Rebecca in the lobby. I've been looking forward to this presentation all week. Ms. Mitchell's proposal represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. When can we get started? Davidson looked at Jasmine with naked desperation. You could save us both. Tell them you were taken out of context. Say it was a misunderstanding. Help me spin this and I'll make sure you get full credit for Henderson Industries. I'll promote you to senior associate. You'll what? Jasmine interrupted. Give me what I've already earned? Stop holding me back from opportunities I've qualified for. Treat me like the professional I've always been. The questions hung between them, highlighting the absurdity of his offer. He was asking her to protect him from the consequences of behavior that had systematically limited her career for 3 years. Davidson's phone buzzed again. This time it was Tom Bradley, the colleague who was supposed to take over the Henderson presentation. The message was brief but devastating. Saw the news. Can't be associated with this, sorry. Even his golden boy was abandoning ship. The network of old boys and connected colleagues that had always protected Davidson was dissolving as quickly as it had formed. In the span of 15 minutes, he'd gone from untouchable to unemployable. What do you want from me? He asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Jasmine looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in 3 years. She saw fear, desperation, and the dawning realization that actions had consequences, even for people who'd spent their entire careers believing they were immune to them. I want you to stay in this room while I give the presentation I prepared, she said calmly. I want you to listen to me do the job you never believed I could do. And then I want you to think about every talented person you've dismissed, every opportunity you've stolen, every dream you've crushed, because someone didn't fit your narrow definition of success. She moved toward the door, then paused. The Henderson Industries deal will close today. It will be worth exactly $10 million in fees. And it will be the last major deal this firm sees for a very long time. The conference room door opened, and Margaret Henderson Walsh stepped inside, her face lighting up when she saw Jasmine. There you are. We're so excited to hear your final presentation. I brought some additional questions about European markets integration. Your initial analysis was brilliant. As Jasmine shook hands with the woman who would determine both their futures, she caught Davidson's reflection in the conference room window. He looked like a man watching his world end, one phone call at a time. And in the distance, more elevators were arriving, bringing reporters, board members, and the inevitable reckoning that followed decades of unchecked prejudice. The $10 million presentation was about to begin. Margaret Henderson Walsh settled into her chair at the polished mahogany table, her keen eyes taking in every detail of the presentation setup. As CEO of a company worth over $1 billion, she'd attended countless pitches from investment firms, But something about Jasmine Mitchell's approach had captured her attention from their very first phone call. "Before we begin," Margaret said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives, "I want you to know that your preliminary risk assessment changed how we think about pension fund management. The way you identified vulnerabilities in our current structure that 3 previous consultants missed, that's exactly why we're here." Jasmine felt a surge of validation that 3 years of undermining hadn't been able to destroy. This was what pure professional recognition felt like, judgment based solely on competence and results. James Chen, the CFO, opened his leather portfolio and spread several documents across the table. "We've run your projections through our internal models. The 15% cost reduction you're projecting seems conservative. Our analysis suggests it could be closer to 18%. Dr. Sarah Martinez nodded enthusiastically. "The inflation hedge strategies alone could save us millions over the next decade. I have never seen anyone structure commodity futures quite like this." Behind them, barely visible through the glass wall, Davidson paced frantically in the hallway. His phone pressed to his ear, his gestures growing more desperate with each conversation. Through the soundproof barriers, they could see his mouth moving rapidly, his free hand running through his perfectly styled hair, destroying the image of control he'd spent decades cultivating. "Shall we begin?" Jasmine asked, moving to the presentation screen with confidence she hadn't felt in years. The first slide illuminated the room: Henderson Industries Pension Restructuring, a comprehensive strategy for long-term growth. Simple, professional, and backed by hundreds of hours of meticulous research. Your current pension fund manages $2.3 billion for 12,000 employees across 6 states, Jasmine began, her voice steady and authoritative. While your current returns are solid, our analysis reveals significant opportunities for optimization without increasing risk exposure. She clicked to the next slide, revealing a complex matrix of investments, projections, and risk assessments. By reallocating 30% of your bond portfolio into diversified international securities and implementing a tiered approach to commodity hedging, we can increase your annual returns by an average of 2.7% while actually reducing volatility. Margaret leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. "Walk me through the international component. Our board has been hesitant about foreign exposure." This was the moment Jasmine had prepared for, the technical deep dive that would separate amateur presentations from professional expertise. She launched into a detailed explanation of currency hedging, political risk insurance, and market correlation analysis that demonstrated not just knowledge, but mastery. As she spoke, something extraordinary was happening in the hallway. Davidson's increasingly frantic phone calls were drawing attention from other employees. Partners emerged from their offices, junior associates clustered near the elevator banks, and the firm's managing director, Patricia Williams, had arrived on the floor with an expression that could freeze water. "The European markets offer particular opportunities right now," Jasmine continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding beyond the conference room. Brexit aftershocks have created temporary undervaluations in several sectors that align perfectly with your long-term stability requirements. James made quick notes on his tablet. "What about liquidity concerns? We need to maintain access to at least 20% of the portfolio for emergency distributions." "Excellent question." Jasmine clicked to a slide showing liquidity tiers and access schedules. "Our structure maintains 30% in highly liquid assets, exceeding your requirements while still optimizing returns. The key is strategic laddering of maturity dates." Dr. Martinez interrupted with a smile. "This is exactly what I hope to hear. You've clearly thought through every scenario." Outside, Patricia Williams had cornered Davidson near the elevator bank. Even through the glass, her body language communicated controlled fury. Other partners had joined the conversation, their faces grave, as Davidson apparently briefed them on the morning's catastrophic developments. The presentation continued with mechanical precision. Jasmine walked the Henderson team through risk modeling, return projections, fee structures, and implementation timelines. Every question they posed was met with detailed, knowledgeable responses. This wasn't just a pitch, it was a masterclass in financial strategy. "Your fee structure is actually lower than our current arrangement," Margaret observed, reviewing the final slides. "How is that possible with this level of service?" Jasmine smiled. "Efficiency. When you truly understand a client's needs and build strategies around their specific goals rather than generic templates, You can deliver better results with less overhead. We're not selling you products. We're solving your problems." The answer was perfect, and Margaret's approving nod confirmed it. But just as Jasmine prepared to transition to closing remarks, the conference room door burst open. Patricia Williams stood in the doorway, her face flushed with barely controlled anger. "Miss Henderson Walsh, I need to speak with you immediately. There's been a serious development that affects your relationship with our firm." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Margaret looked from Patricia to Jasmine, her business instincts immediately on high alert. "What kind of development?" Patricia glanced at Jasmine with something that might have been sympathy. "I'm afraid there's been an incident involving discriminatory behavior by one of our senior partners. It's about to become very public, and I felt you had a right to know before making any commitments." James and Dr. Martinez exchanged worried glances. Corporate scandals had a way of contaminating everything they touched, and no pension fund wanted to be associated with discrimination controversies. "What exactly are we talking about?" Margaret asked, her voice taking on the steel edge that had made her legendary in boardroom negotiations. Patricia hesitated, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. Richard Davidson, one of our founding partners, was recorded making inappropriate comments about Ms. Mitchell's capabilities and role at the firm. The recording is being published in Financial Services Weekly tomorrow morning. The silence that followed was deafening. Jasmine felt her stomach drop as she realized her moment of professional triumph was about to be overshadowed by the very prejudice she'd fought against for 3 years. Margaret's expression hardened. What kind of inappropriate comments? Comments suggesting that Ms. Mitchell was hired as a diversity quota rather than based on merit, Patricia admitted reluctantly. Comments questioning whether clients would be comfortable working with someone of her background. Dr. Martinez actually gasped. James closed his portfolio with a sharp snap. Margaret's face transformed into something that would have terrified medieval armies. "And where is Mr. Davidson now?" Margaret asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Patricia gestured toward the hallway. "He's been suspended pending a full investigation. The board is meeting in an emergency session this afternoon." Jasmine stood frozen beside the presentation screen, watching 3 months of work crumble in real time. The professional validation she'd felt just minutes earlier was being poisoned by Davidson's bigotry, even in his absence. But Margaret Henderson Walsh hadn't built a billion-dollar company by making decisions based on other people's failures. She turned to Jasmine with laser focus. "Ms. Mitchell, I have one question for you, and I want a completely honest answer." Jasmine braced herself. "Yes, ma'am." "Did Richard Davidson's opinions about your capabilities influence the quality of work you've presented to us today?" The question was simple, direct, and cut straight to the heart of everything that mattered. Jasmine looked at the presentation materials spread across the table, at the months of research and analysis, at the innovative strategies she'd developed through countless late nights and weekend sessions. "No, ma'am. This work represents my abilities, my analysis, and my commitment to solving your company's specific challenges. Mr. Davidson's opinions about me have no bearing on the quality of what I've presented." Margaret nodded slowly. "And if we move forward with this partnership, would you be the primary point of contact for our account?" Patricia Williams stepped forward. "Ms. Henderson Walsh, given the circumstances, perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements." "I'm asking Ms. Mitchell," Margaret interrupted coldly, "not you." All eyes turned to Jasmine. This was the moment that would define not just the deal, but potentially her entire career. She could play it safe, defer to senior management, accept whatever reduced role they offered her in the aftermath of the scandal. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met Margaret's gaze directly. "Yes, ma'am. I would be honored to serve as your primary contact and to personally oversee the implementation of everything we've discussed today." Margaret smiled for the first time since Patricia's interruption. "Excellent! Then we have a deal." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. $10 million in fees. Secured not despite the discrimination scandal, but in direct defiance of it. Patricia Williams looked stunned. "Ms. Henderson Walsh, I think you should consider the reputational risks." "The only reputational risk I see," Margaret said, standing to shake Jasmine's hand, "is being associated with people who judge talent by anything other than results. Ms. Mitchell has just presented the most comprehensive pension strategy I've seen in 30 years of business. I'm not going to let someone else's prejudice cost my employees their financial security." As they shook hands, Jasmine felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just a business deal. It was validation, vindication, and proof that excellence could triumph over prejudice when given the chance. But even as she savored the moment, she could see Davidson through the glass wall, slumped in a chair outside Patricia's office, his career and reputation in ruins. The $10 million handshake was complete, but the real reckoning was just beginning. The Henderson Industries team departed at 11:15, leaving behind signed contracts worth $10 million and a promise to recommend Davidson and Associates to their industry contacts, with the explicit caveat that Jasmine Mitchell would handle all communications. Margaret Henderson Walsh's final words still echoed in the conference room. Excellence recognizes excellence, regardless of what small minds might think. But if Jasmine thought the morning's drama was over, the next hour would prove her devastatingly wrong. Patricia Williams returned to Conference Room A carrying a thick manila folder and wearing the expression of someone about to perform surgery without anesthesia. She closed the door behind her and activated the room's privacy settings, ensuring their conversation wouldn't suffer the same fate as Jasmine's earlier encounter with Davidson. "Congratulations on closing the Henderson deal," Patricia began, though her tone suggested celebration was premature. "Under normal circumstances, a success of this magnitude would guarantee your promotion to senior associate." Jasmine felt ice forming in her stomach. Under normal circumstances? Patricia opened the folder, revealing printed emails, legal documents, and what appeared to be a crisis management strategy. "The recording of your conversation with Davidson hit the internet 20 minutes ago. Not tomorrow's newspaper. Right now." Someone leaked it to multiple financial blogs simultaneously. Quote, she slid her tablet across the table, showing a website called Finance Watch with the headline, "Shocking! Investment executive caught on tape making racist comments about employee." Below it was an embedded audio player with a timestamp showing the full 15-minute conversation. Jasmine's hands trembled as she pressed play. Her own voice came through clearly. "I've earned my place here." Then Davidson's response, somehow sounding even more venomous in digital reproduction. "Have you? Or are you here because of quotas? Because it looks good in the company brochure to have a diverse face or two?" "It's been shared over 3,000 times in the last hour," Patricia continued grimly. "The comments section is extensive. Financial Twitter is having a field day. And our phones haven't stopped ringing." The full weight of public exposure settled over Jasmine like a suffocating blanket. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about becoming the unwilling center of a national conversation about workplace discrimination. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Patricia pulled out another document. The board held an emergency conference call. "Davidson has been terminated, effective immediately. His partnership stake will be bought out at the minimum allowable rate. He's also being stripped of his voting rights and his name will be removed from all company materials." Swift justice, but Jasmine suspected there was more coming. "However," Patricia continued, confirming her fears, "the board is concerned about the firm's reputation. We're already facing 3 client cancellations, and 2 major prospects have postponed their meetings indefinitely. The consensus is that we need to demonstrate accountability and change." "What kind of change?" Patricia hesitated, then slid a final document across the table. It was a severance agreement, generous by any standard, offering 18 months of salary plus benefits in exchange for Jasmine's resignation and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. "They want me gone too," Jasmine said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "They want the entire situation to disappear. Fresh start, clean slate, move forward without the baggage of this controversy." The logic was brutally corporate. Eliminate both the perpetrator and the victim, then claim the problem never existed. Jasmine stared at the severance agreement, recognizing it for what it truly was. Hush money designed to protect the firm's reputation at the expense of justice. "And if I refuse?" Patricia's expression grew even more uncomfortable. "The board believes that keeping you on staff would serve as a constant reminder of this incident. They're concerned that every client meeting, every presentation, every business relationship would be overshadowed by the circumstances of your prominence." Translation: they were worried that her success would make other clients question how many talented employees they'd previously overlooked or dismissed. Jasmine set down the document without signing it. "I need time to think." Of course, but Jasmine. Patricia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Between you and me, fighting this might not be worth it. The legal battle would be brutal, public, and expensive. Even if you won, your name would be permanently associated with this controversy. Sometimes the best revenge is moving on and succeeding elsewhere. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Mitchell, this is Jonathan Walsh from Financial Services Weekly. Could we schedule an interview regarding your experience at Davidson & Associates? The story is already generating significant industry interest. Then another text, this one from a different reporter. Jasmine, I'm writing a piece about workplace discrimination in finance. Would you be willing to share your perspective? And another, Ms. Mitchell, several employment attorneys have reached out wanting to discuss potential legal action. Are you interested in exploring your options? Her phone continued buzzing with messages from journalists, lawyers, and advocacy groups. The story was taking on a life of its own, growing beyond a simple workplace incident into something that could reshape conversations about discrimination in corporate America. Patricia watched the parade of notifications with a growing alarm. This is exactly what the board was worried about. The longer this stays in the news, the more damage it does to everyone involved. But even as Patricia spoke, something remarkable was happening in Jasmine's inbox. Professional emails were arriving from headhunters, executives from competing firms, and industry leaders who'd heard about her Henderson Industries presentation. Ms. Mitchell, I'm the managing partner at Steinberg & Associates. We've been following your work for some time and would love to discuss opportunities. Jasmine, congratulations on the Henderson deal. Our firm is looking for someone with your expertise in pension restructuring. Ms. Mitchell, as CEO of Meridian Financial, I want to personally invite you to consider joining our executive team. The offers were pouring in from firms that saw her not as a liability, but as a proven performer who just demonstrated grace under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Word of her successful presentation in the midst of a discrimination crisis was spreading through professional networks faster than the scandal itself. Patricia noticed the change in Jasmine's expression. What is it? Jasmine turned her phone screen toward Patricia, showing the flood of job offers and interview requests. It seems not everyone thinks I'm unemployable. Patricia's eyes widened as she scrolled through the messages. These weren't sympathy offers or diversity initiatives. These were serious propositions from major firms offering senior positions with substantial compensation packages. I don't understand, Patricia muttered. The board was certain that the controversy would make you difficult to place elsewhere. Jasmine stood up, feeling stronger than she had in years. The board was wrong. They assumed that competence contaminated by discrimination becomes worthless. But the market is telling them something different. Excellence speaks for itself, regardless of the circumstances that bring it to light. She picked up the severance agreement and, without hesitation, tore it in half. I won't be resigning, Patricia. And I won't be signing any non-disclosure agreements. What happened in that conference room this morning was wrong, and hiding from it won't make it right. Patricia looked genuinely panicked. Jasmine, please reconsider. The board has already made their decision. If you force their hand, they'll find other ways to make your position untenable. Then they'll have to explain to the Henderson Industries team why they're removing the person who just secured them a $10 million client. They'll have to explain to these other firms why they're driving away talent. And they'll have to explain to the press why they're punishing the victim of discrimination, instead of addressing the systemic problems that allowed it to happen. As if summoned by her words, Rebecca's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Mitchell, there are several reporters in the lobby asking to speak with you. Also, Margaret Henderson Walsh is on line 3. She says it's urgent regarding your partnership moving forward. Jasmine looked at Patricia, who appeared to be calculating the growing cost of their attempted cover-up. Every phone call, every interview request, every job offer was proof that the marketplace valued her skills more than the firm's desire for convenient silence. The board meets again at 2 o'clock, Patricia said finally. I suggest you think very carefully about what you want your future to look like. But Jasmine was already thinking about the future. Not just her own, but the future of every talented professional who'd been dismissed, overlooked, or undervalued because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of success. The Henderson Industries deal had been worth $10 million, But the conversation that was now rippling through the financial industry might be worth something far more valuable: real change in how talent was recognized and rewarded. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from a name she recognized: Dr. Angela Foster, the first Black woman to be named CEO of a Fortune 500 financial services company. "Jasmine, I heard about this morning. Congratulations on handling an impossible situation with such professionalism. Let's talk about what comes next. The industry needs more people like you in leadership positions." As Jasmine read the message, she realized that Davidson's attempt to destroy her career had actually illuminated her value to the entire industry. His prejudice had become a spotlight, showcasing exactly the kind of excellence that forward-thinking firms were desperate to acquire. The 2 o'clock board meeting was going to be very interesting indeed. The board meeting convened at exactly 2 o'clock in Davidson & Associates' executive conference room on the 45th floor. 7 senior partners sat around an oval table made of Brazilian rosewood, their faces reflecting the gravity of a crisis that threatened to destroy everything they'd built over 3 decades. Robert Chen, the firm's managing director, called the meeting to order with the demeanor of a general surveying a battlefield. At 68, he'd weathered market crashes, regulatory investigations, and hostile takeover attempts, but nothing had prepared him for the public relations nightmare currently consuming his company. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated stress, "we're facing an existential threat. In the past 4 hours, we've lost 6 major clients, representing over $40 million in annual fees. Our stock price has dropped 12%, and the phones won't stop ringing with cancellation requests." Patricia Williams placed a thick folder on the table. "The damage assessment is comprehensive. Morrison Industries, Berkshire Holdings, Patterson Group, and 3 others have terminated their contracts, citing reputational concerns. 2 pension funds have frozen their accounts pending review. And Henderson Industries has sent a very pointed message stating that their relationship is contingent on Ms. Mitchell remaining as their primary contact." Thomas Brennan, the firm's oldest partner, leaned back in his leather chair with visible frustration. "This is absurd. One employee's personal grievance is destroying decades of reputation building. Why are we allowing this to continue?" "Because," interrupted Elizabeth Shaw, the firm's head of legal affairs, "attempting to silence or retaliate against Ms. Mitchell at this point would trigger every employment protection law on the books. We're already facing potential lawsuits. Adding wrongful termination to the mix would be corporate suicide." The room fell silent as the partners absorbed the legal reality. Their hands were tied not by political correctness, but by the simple fact that Jasmine held all the leverage. "What about this severance offer?" asked Michael Torres, the youngest partner at 42. "Surely she'll see reason." Patricia shook her head grimly. She rejected it, tore up the agreement without even reading the full terms. And based on the job offers flooding her phone, she has good reason to be confident about her prospects elsewhere. Robert pulled out his tablet and displayed a news article on the room's main screen. The headline read, "Financial prodigy stands against discrimination. Jasmine Mitchell's stand sparks industry-wide conversation." "The narrative is getting away from us," he said, scrolling through increasingly sympathetic coverage of Jasmine's situation. "Business blogs are calling her a hero. Employment advocates are using her story to push for stronger workplace protections. And our competitors are publicly courting her on social media." Quote. The article featured quotes from several industry leaders praising Jasmine's handling of the situation and criticizing firms that allowed discriminatory behavior to persist. One CEO had written, "Ms. Mitchell's professionalism under impossible circumstances demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership our industry needs. Any firm would be fortunate to have her." "There's more," Patricia added reluctantly. 3 investigative journalists are now digging into our historical hiring and promotion practices. They're requesting employment records, demographic data, and interview notes going back 5 years. The implications were staggering. If reporters uncovered patterns of discrimination beyond Davidson's individual actions, the firm wouldn't just lose clients. They could face federal investigations and class action lawsuits. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. We've built this firm through merit and results. We don't discriminate." Davidson was an aberration, not a pattern. Elizabeth pulled out a legal pad covered with notes. "Actually, Thomas, the preliminary data is troubling. In the past 5 years, we've hired 47 new associates. 39 were white, 6 were Asian, and 2 were black. Of our current 23 senior associates, 21 are white men. Our partnership has 8 members, all white, 7 men. The statistics hung in the air like an indictment. What the partners had always seen as natural selection based on qualifications suddenly looked like systematic exclusion when viewed through the lens of demographic data. Those numbers don't prove discrimination, Michael protested. They reflect the qualified candidate pool. Tell that to a jury, Elizabeth replied sharply. Or to the Department of Labor investigators, who are likely already drafting subpoenas. Robert stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's financial district. 45 floors below, the city pulsed with ambition and opportunity, but up here, the weight of consequence was crushing the air from the room. "What are our options?" he asked without turning around. Patricia consulted her notes. Option 1, we fight. Defend our practices. Claim Davidson was a rogue actor. And weather the storm. Risk, extended legal battles, continued negative publicity, and potential federal oversight. She paused, then continued. Option 2, we accommodate. Promote Ms. Mitchell to senior associate immediately. Implement comprehensive diversity training and hope the gesture satisfies public opinion. Risk, appears reactive and potentially opens us to demands from other employees. And option 3, Thomas asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Option 3, we restructure completely. Ms. Mitchell becomes a junior partner with equity. We undergo a full diversity audit, and we essentially rebuild our corporate culture from the ground up. Risk, short-term costs, and potential partner departures. The silence stretched for several minutes as each partner calculated the personal cost of their collective failure. Their exclusive club was being forced to acknowledge that exclusivity itself had become a liability. Robert's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then turned back to the room with an expression of complete defeat. Henderson Industries just sent their final contract terms. $10 million in fees. 3-year agreement, but with specific language requiring Ms. Mitchell's continued employment and promotion to senior management. They're essentially holding our biggest new client hostage to ensure we treat our employee fairly. The irony was perfect and devastating. Their most lucrative new relationship was being used to force them into the kind of equitable behavior that should have been standard practice all along. Elizabeth leaned forward. There's something else you need to know. I just received a call from 3 other major clients. They're not canceling their contracts, but they're demanding meetings to discuss our diversity initiatives. They want specific commitments to inclusive hiring and promotion practices. They're forcing us to change, Michael said quietly, the reality finally sinking in. No, Robert corrected, returning to his seat. They're forcing us to become what we should have been all along, what we claimed we were, but never actually practiced. Patricia placed one final document on the table. Ms. Mitchell is downstairs in conference room A. She's agreed to meet with us, but she's brought a witness. What kind of witness? Thomas asked nervously. Margaret Henderson Walsh. Apparently, she wanted to observe how we handle the situation before finalizing their contract. The boardroom erupted in nervous murmurs. Their biggest client was now personally invested in ensuring justice for the employee they'd tried to silence. Robert stood up slowly, straightening his tie like a man preparing for execution. Gentlemen, ladies, it appears we're about to learn the true cost of our assumptions. And based on this morning's events, it's going to be far more expensive than $10 million. The elevator down to the 42nd floor had never felt longer. In the span of 6 hours, the power dynamic at Davidson and Associates had completely inverted, and the reckoning waiting in conference room A would determine whether the firm survived its own prejudices. As the elevator doors opened, Robert could see Jasmine and Margaret through the glass walls, 2 women whose excellence had just rewritten the rules of corporate accountability. The elevator doors opened with their familiar chime, but this time the sound carried the weight of inevitability. Robert Chen emerged first, followed by the remaining partners of Davidson and Associates, each one moving like condemned prisoners approaching their sentencing. Through the glass walls of conference room A, they could see Jasmine Mitchell seated at the head of the mahogany table where, just 6 hours earlier, she'd been dismissed and humiliated. Now she occupied the power position with the quiet confidence of someone who discovered her true worth in the marketplace of merit. Beside her sat Margaret Henderson Walsh, her presence transforming what should have been an internal disciplinary meeting into something far more consequential. The CEO of Henderson Industries wasn't just observing. She was evaluating whether Davidson and Associates deserved to manage her family's legacy. Robert knocked gently on the door, then entered with the careful movements of a diplomat entering hostile territory. "Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Henderson Walsh, thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Margaret's response was crisp and unforgiving. "Mr. Chen, I'm here because I need to understand how a firm I'm trusting with $2 billion in pension funds allowed systematic discrimination to flourish for years." The words hit like a physical blow. This wasn't about damage control anymore. This was about fundamental competence and character. Jasmine gestured to the chairs across from them. "Please, have a seat." "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what kind of company Davidson and Associates really is." As the partners settled into their seats, Patricia Williams placed a digital recorder on the table. "Given this morning's events, I think we should document this conversation properly." The symbolism was perfect. The same recording technology that had exposed Davidson's bigotry would now capture whatever accountability followed. Robert cleared his throat, visibly struggling to find words that might salvage both his firm's reputation and his personal legacy. "Ms. Mitchell, first let me offer our most sincere apologies for the treatment you experienced this morning. Richard Davidson's comments were completely unacceptable and do not reflect the values of this organization." Jasmine's expression remained neutral. "What values would those be, Mr. Chen?" "Because from where I'm sitting, Mr. Davidson's comments seemed perfectly consistent with 3 years of systematic exclusion, subtle undermining, and artificial limitations on my advancement." Margaret leaned forward, her business instincts engaged. "Mr. Chen, I've reviewed your firm's promotional history. In the past 5 years, you've promoted 17 people to senior associate. 16 were white men. 1 was a white woman. 0 were people of color. How do you explain that statistical anomaly?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Robert glanced at his partners, searching for support that wasn't coming. Thomas Brennan studied his hands. Michael Torres stared out the window. Elizabeth Shaw took notes with the mechanical precision of someone documenting a disaster. "The financial services industry has historically struggled with diversity," Robert finally offered. "We hire the most qualified candidates available, and unfortunately, the pipeline hasn't always provided." "Stop." Jasmine's voice cut through his explanation with surgical precision. "That's exactly the kind of institutional gaslighting that allows discrimination to continue. You're suggesting that in a city with Columbia, NYU, and dozens of other world-class universities, qualified candidates of color simply don't exist." Margaret nodded approvingly. "Ms. Mitchell is correct. Henderson Industries recruits from the same universities, and we've had no difficulty building a diverse leadership team. The difference isn't in the pipeline, it's in the commitment to finding and developing talent." Patricia shuffled through her papers nervously. "We are committed to diversity. We have programs." "You have programs that hire people of color into junior positions and then systematically prevent their advancement," Jasmine interrupted. "I've watched it happen to others. Subtle changes to promotion criteria when minorities become eligible. Sudden concerns about cultural fit when advancement opportunities arise. Client assignments that conveniently exclude diverse team members from high-visibility projects." The accuracy of her observations was devastating. Each example resonated with situations the partners had witnessed, but chosen to ignore, dismiss, or rationalize away. Elizabeth Shaw looked up from her notes. "Ms. Mitchell, if you had such concerns about our practices, why didn't you report them through proper channels?" The question revealed everything wrong with their corporate culture in a single sentence. Jasmine's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Report them to whom?" "To Mr. Davidson, who was actively undermining me. To HR, which reports directly to the same partners who benefit from the current system. To you, Miss Shaw, who just questioned why I didn't speak up about the discrimination I was experiencing." Margaret's expression had hardened into something that would have terrified medieval armies. "Are you seriously asking why a victim of workplace discrimination didn't trust the perpetrators to investigate themselves?" The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of a city that had already moved on to other stories. But in this conference room, the reckoning was just beginning. Robert tried a different approach. "Ms. Mitchell, we want to make this right. We're prepared to offer you an immediate promotion to senior associate, a substantial salary increase, and a leadership role in our new diversity initiatives." Jasmine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're offering me what I should have received 2 years ago, based on merit alone, and you're asking me to fix the culture that discriminated against me in the first place." She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline where other firms were actively recruiting her with offers that dwarfed anything Davidson and Associates could provide. "Mr. Chen, in the 6 hours since this story broke, I've received 47 interview requests from competing firms. 12 of them are offering senior associate positions, 6 are offering junior partnerships. 3 are discussing custom roles that would make me the youngest managing director in the industry." The numbers were staggering, but Margaret wasn't surprised. "Excellence always finds recognition, Mr. Chen. The question is whether you'll be part of that recognition or an obstacle to it." Patricia leaned forward desperately. "Ms. Mitchell, those offers are based on novelty and publicity. We're offering you a long-term career with a firm that knows your work intimately." "You mean a firm that knew my work intimately and still tried to give credit to a less qualified white colleague?" Jasmine turned back to face them. "A firm that introduced me to clients as a diversity hire rather than as your top performer? A firm that questioned whether I belonged in the same rooms where I was consistently delivering the best results?" Thomas Brennan finally spoke up, his voice carrying the frustration of someone watching his world collapse. "What do you want from us? An admission that we're all racists? A complete transformation of everything we've built?" The question revealed the fundamental misunderstanding that had created this crisis. Jasmine returned to her seat, her composure intact despite the emotional weight of the moment. "I want you to understand that this isn't about individual racism, Mr. Brennan. It's about systemic exclusion that you've maintained through willful blindness. Every time you promoted someone because they fit the culture, you were prioritizing comfort over competence. Every time you worried about whether clients would be comfortable with diverse representation, you were choosing prejudice over profit." Margaret pulled out her phone and showed them a news article that had been published during their meeting. The headline read, "Henderson Industries CEO praises employee who exposed workplace discrimination." "This interview went live 20 minutes ago," Margaret said. "I told the reporter that Ms. Mitchell's handling of this morning's situation demonstrated exactly the kind of character and competence that American businesses need in leadership positions." She scrolled to a particularly devastating quote. "Any firm that would punish or push out someone of Ms. Mitchell's caliber over a discrimination scandal is a firm that prioritizes protecting prejudice over promoting talent. Henderson Industries is proud to work with professionals who stand up for what's right." Robert's face had gone ashen. "Ms. Henderson Walsh, surely you understand that we need to manage this situation carefully. Precipitous changes could destabilize." "The only thing that needs destabilizing is a culture that allowed this morning to happen," Margaret interrupted. "Mr. Chen, I've been in business for 40 years. I've seen firms rise and fall based on their ability to recognize and develop talent. What I witnessed today tells me everything I need to know about Davidson and Associates' commitment to excellence." Jasmine's phone buzzed with another notification. She glanced at it, then looked up with an expression of genuine surprise. "The Securities and Exchange Commission wants to schedule a meeting. Apparently, they're reviewing whether our firm's hiring and promotion practices constitute material misrepresentation to investors who expect diversity in financial management." The partners exchanged looks of barely controlled panic. SEC investigations had the power to destroy firms completely, and their discriminatory practices were now documented in audio recordings being disseminated across the internet. Elizabeth Shaw's legal training kicked in. "Ms. Mitchell, we need to discuss how to handle regulatory inquiries cooperatively." "We?" Jasmine's eyebrows rose. "Ms. Shaw, I think you're misunderstanding my position here. I'm not part of management. I'm not responsible for institutional failures. I'm a documented victim of workplace discrimination who will cooperate fully with any federal investigation." The distinction was crucial and terrifying. Jasmine wasn't just leaving. She was positioning herself as a witness against the firm's practices rather than a defender of them. Margaret stood up, signaling that the meeting was approaching its conclusion. "Gentlemen, ladies, I came here today to understand how you plan to address this situation. What I've learned is that you're more concerned with managing the consequences of discrimination than eliminating the causes of it. She gathered her materials with the efficiency of someone who'd made a final decision. Henderson Industries will honor our contract with Davidson & Associates for one reason only. Ms. Mitchell will be transitioning to a senior position at Henderson Financial Services, our in-house investment division. She'll continue managing our pension restructuring as our employee rather than yours. The announcement landed like a bomb. Henderson Industries wasn't just switching advisors. They were actively recruiting Jasmine away from Davidson & Associates while maintaining the $10 million contract under her direct control. Robert stood up shakily. Ms. Henderson Walsh, that's highly irregular. Investment advisors typically maintain relationships through their firms. Investment advisors who've demonstrated exceptional competence under extraordinary pressure can write their own rules, Margaret replied coolly. Ms. Mitchell has proven that she delivers results regardless of the obstacles her former colleagues place in her path. Jasmine felt a surge of validation that 3 years of systemic undermining couldn't diminish. This wasn't just a job offer. It was recognition that her value transcended the limitations others had tried to impose on her. The offer includes a starting salary that's 40% higher than your senior associate scale, Margaret continued, immediate equity participation, and a clear path to executive leadership. Plus, she'll be working for people who judge her by her results rather than her race. Patricia made one last desperate attempt. Ms. Mitchell, please consider what you're walking away from. This firm has been your professional home for 3 years. This firm has been my professional prison for 3 years, Jasmine corrected. The difference is that I'm finally free to pursue opportunities that match my capabilities rather than your limitations. She stood up, extending her hand to Margaret in a gesture that symbolized far more than a business partnership. Ms. Henderson Walsh, I accept your offer. When would you like me to start? Margaret smiled with genuine warmth. How about Monday? I think it's time you experienced what it feels like to work for people who appreciate excellence rather than merely tolerate it. As they shook hands, the partners of Davidson & Associates sat in stunned silence, watching their most talented employee transition seamlessly into a role that would make her one of the youngest senior executives in the financial services industry. Robert made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Ms. Mitchell, we hope you'll remember the opportunities this firm provided. I'll remember everything, Mr. Chen, Jasmine replied, her voice carrying the weight of 3 years' worth of accumulated injustice. I'll remember every subtle slight, every missed promotion, every time my contributions were minimized or attributed to others. And I'll make sure that story is told honestly. She paused at the door, turning back for one final observation, but I'll also remember that excellence always finds recognition, even when it has to create its own opportunities. The market rewards competence, regardless of the prejudices that try to suppress it. Margaret joined her at the door, addressing the partners directly. Gentlemen, ladies, you're witnessing the cost of discrimination in its purest form. It's not just legal liability or bad publicity. It's the loss of exceptional talent to competitors who recognize value where you saw only obstacles. As they left Conference Room A, Patricia Williams began calculating the devastating mathematics of their failure. $10 million in fees transferred to a competitor. Their most capable employee was recruited away by a client. Federal investigations looming. And a story that would follow them for years, serving as a cautionary tale about the true cost of systemic prejudice. 6 months later, Financial Services Weekly would publish a follow-up article titled The Davidson Effect: How One Recording Changed an Industry. It would detail how Jasmine Mitchell's experience had sparked industry-wide conversations about diversity, led to new SEC guidelines on discriminatory practices, and inspired dozens of talented professionals to challenge barriers that had previously seemed insurmountable. Jasmine herself would be featured on the cover, photographed in Henderson Industries' executive offices, with a caption that read, "Excellence Unleashed, the rising star who refused to accept limitations." But on this October afternoon, as she walked out of Davidson & Associates for the final time, Jasmine Mitchell wasn't thinking about vindication or industry transformation. She was thinking about Monday morning, when she would finally work for people who measured her worth by her contributions rather than their prejudices. The $10 million deal had been just the beginning. The real victory was walking away with her integrity intact and her future unlimited by other people's narrow definitions of success. Behind her, the partners of Davidson & Associates sat in Conference Room A, learning the hardest lesson in business. That talent, like water, always finds its proper level. And when artificial barriers are finally removed, the flood of achievement that follows can reshape entire industries. The elevator doors close with their familiar chime, but this time, they were opening on a future where excellence would finally be free to flourish without apology or limitation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.